And so I think this week I sent an email about something like mindfully telling your authentic stories of self. A lot of times when we practice mindfulness, we're always trying to get to a less fabricated, less manufactured sense of reality. Since so much of our lives are lived through stories. So much of our lives are lived through interpretations and assumptions and expectations, imaginary worries and dreams and hopes, that when we come to sit on the cushion, we're just trying to try to be more present with what's here. Get to a less fabricated sense of reality. And ostensibly, being in a monastery, the goal is to have some sort of spiritual awakening, some sort of spiritual insight. And that was definitely part of the reason I came originally to the monastery about 3.5 years ago. But if I think about what broke the camel's back, the last straw really, was that I think I was just looking to find like love and belonging, learning how to be in connection and family and friends and like be happy. It seemed really clear, in order to be happy, I need to somehow find a way to like have intimate, deep relationships, romantic, friendship, family, whatever it is. There's this weird myth in Western modern culture that we're individuals, that we can break off as an island and gain sufficient wealth and education and collect good stuff that we like and be happy. And I fell into that trap for many years. I came from a pretty poor family. My parents immigrated to the States in the 80s from Korea. And my father was born in the 40s, which means that by the time the Korean War happened in the early 50s, he was a young boy of maybe 7 or 8. And my mother was born during or right before the war. And if you've ever studied the Korean War, you know that it took, the entire country was at war. The entire peninsula was at war during that time. And so I imagine my parents were definitely impacted, and my grandparents were definitely impacted. And it wasn't until a few years ago that I thought about it and realized that, because they never talked about it, and I never heard about it from my parents or my grandparents. And so this like Civil War country in the 50s that was very agriculture-based, very backward in terms of technology and modern standards. And then my parents came 30 years later to the United States, which was very modern. So my parents grew up without electricity, didn't have a television. You know, it was a very different time and place. And so growing up when I was a kid, I grew up in Delaware. And so I often felt very different and isolated. I was often like the only Asian kid in the class, or one of maybe 2 or 3 kids that were Asian. And felt like at an early age I had to make a choice that I was either going to follow my parents' way and be like a traditional Korean kid, or I was going to follow the American way, which is kind of weird to say since I'm a U.S. citizen. But, and I think I chose the American way for a long time. So I'm going to try to be American and try to like be like a normal American child. And I think to some extent we all do this. Growing up, we have to make choices to get a sense of belonging, to feel loved, to feel like we fit in some way. And so for a long time I was like, didn't like Korean food, would eat Korean food at home, a lot of soup with beans and rice and vegetables. A lot of vegetables grown in the backyard that were organic before organic was a thing. And I was like, why can't we have hot dogs and pizza and French fries? That's normal. That's good. Feels like we're eating like rabbit food or something. And these days it's the complete opposite. But so all to say, growing up, I felt pretty lonely. And I remember for a long time I was really trying to I'm just gonna figure out the truth. I'm gonna gather a lot of money, gather a lot of resources, and I'll like buy my way out of like fame and money and smarts, intelligence into being happy. And at one point, this kind of started changing. So after grad school, I bought an RV. I had this plan of I'm going to travel the country in an RV, and it'll force me to make friends because I won't know anyone. I have to go to a new city every few days, and I'll just have to make new friends. Otherwise, I'm going to be really lonely. And so I bought this used RV off eBay, drove across the country, met a lot of good people. Some cities I did well in, made a lot of good friends. I surprised myself at how well I could meet people. Other cities felt very lonely and I didn't meet anyone, and it's pretty sad. And part of it was this myth of like, I'll be what they call a digital nomad these days. These people, programmers, writers, marketers, or whatever, that start their business online and can travel wherever they want because they have a location-independent business, and they can they're not tied down to a family or a location or any of the stuff that a lot of people these days think are hindrances or impediments to a free life. And I did that for about 2 years. And I remember once in California, San Francisco, the Golden City these days. It was on a Sunday, I believe. I was driving my RV and something broke down in it. And I didn't know any friends in San Francisco, and this is a problem that needed to get fixed immediately. And I was really struggling. Went to a Home Depot and spent like 3-4 hours trying to fix this RV. It was like a septic sewage issue. And so I'd go back and forth from the Home Depot trying to find different creative solutions to fix this septic leak that was happening on the RV into the parking lot. And I was like, I'm gonna get arrested or something bad's gonna happen. Can't believe I spent like most of my life savings on this used RV that just keeps breaking down. Why am I traveling across the country to have to fix this broken RV and thousands of miles from any friends or family I know? Fortunately, I fixed it, so that was good. But then that night, I parked somewhere in Berkeley, and got a beer in a bar, and then I just cried in the RV. I was like, I can't believe I spent all this time and money. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. Trying to make friends and moving every few days to a new city. And it was around that time I decided, I think I'm done with this RV adventure, and I'm gonna go back and focus on not making money, not trying to make a bunch of friends, not try to be powerful or status-driven or whatever. And go back to, I loved meditation. I did meditation a few years ago. That seemed to really work. And I have a few really good friends in Boston. I'm gonna move to Boston and be near them and just start over. I'm gonna focus on community. I'm gonna put my roots down. Even though I could live anywhere I want, even though I could probably go anywhere I want, I'm gonna spend a few years in Boston and make some really good friends that I already have there. I already had 3 or 4 really close friends in Boston, so I'm just going to go there. And then when I was there, I got really into Dharma and meditation. Started really changing my life around, and got really connected with a lot of the meditation communities. But there was this nagging feeling of like, I want more. I go to the groups, feel really connected, it's really lovely. But how do I transition? How does this impact my work? How does this impact my relationships? How does this impact my roommates? How do I live this fully? And in that quest, I eventually started a meditation household. I gathered a few other meditators and we decided we're going to live together and start a house together. And we did that for several months. And one day, 2 of the roommates had a huge argument and kind of been simmering over the months. You know, there's kind of things that accumulate in relationships that if they're not spoken just become bigger and bigger and bigger. And eventually they were both in a stressful situation one day and they just kind of triggered each other and it didn't go well. And it was at that point I realized, you know what, I think I should probably go to that monastery that one of my friends is at in Vermont, and I don't think I can do this. I don't think I can do this myself. I don't think I can run a meditation house. I don't know what I'm doing. Like I knew I needed community when I moved to Boston, but there was still a part of me that wanted control. Like I'm the one that starts the house. I set the rules, or we work it out democratically or something. We're gonna build this collaborative household. But it was at that point I realized, we don't really know what we're doing. And I'm still trying to have control and still have a sense of what I'm doing. And so that was about 3.5 years ago. But I don't know, maybe 2 months later I moved to the monastery and been here ever since. And it's interesting that one of the big things that I came to the monastery was, again, working on relationship, getting a sense of belonging, getting a sense of deep connection, being of service. And so often I want to blame the structure or other people there as the problem. If only so-and-so was different, or if only there was more time or something, then I could be really good friends, or then I could be really work on these things or something. But each time it's just the realization of like, but I'm really the one that's turning away also. Like, there are conditions, there are circumstances. It's really me that's turning away when the opportunities are present to really connect and engage in these challenging areas of relationship, whether it's trying to feel seen or state your boundaries or say what you need or offering or asking for help or whatever it is. These are all things that society doesn't really teach us. Hopefully, if we're in a healthy family, you'll have good role models, but for a lot of us, these are just things we have to learn through trial and error. And fortunately, in a good community like this, and especially in a residential community that's committed to working on these kinds of things, where everyone's willing to examine themselves and work with each other, we can change the stories we operate by. Because for so long, the story I had in my head was that I'm different. And because I'm different, I have to try to be the same. I have to be normal like everyone else. And my differences set me apart, make me the outlier, make me not belong. And part of the thing I learned at the monastery was actually that, lo and behold, even though there's some superficial things like that Vermont seems to exacerbate in terms of race, there are certain common experiences that everyone shares, like challenges, speaking with one's parents or loved ones that I always took as something that's mine. And so learning to share my story, because for so long it was a source of like shame, so long a source of disconnection. And by sharing the stories, being free of them, able to make them into an object that's not my identity, not just something in my mind that's telling me it's true, but something I can put on paper or vocalize into words and share with other people. And even if people don't have the same experience, don't have the same backgrounds, that was a dramatic effect I did. People can still connect on the feeling. So for those of you who know me and are connected to me through this technology called Facebook, every once in a while I just post these stream of consciousness thoughts, whatever's on my mind, oftentimes right before or right after a retreat. And recently I shared about all the challenges growing up Korean American. That for much of it I've worked through, but I don't really share vocally to people. Things like, this is actually something I realized in the monastery as well, is that people have no idea what it's like growing up Korean American. I shouldn't assume that they do. And that's actually beneficial to share sometimes. It's hard to talk with my parents because we have a language barrier. I don't speak very good Korean. My mother doesn't speak very good English. So even if I want to talk to her about difficult things, there's an added frustrating level of language. Or looking in the mirror and expecting to see a white face looking back at me, because that's what I always see on a television screen or what I see in a movie screen. And as a kid, remembering as a teenager being surprised that I see a Korean face looking back at me in the mirror. But I usually post these things on Facebook in some sense, because I want to change the culture of Facebook from we're just sharing the nice, happy things so that we all feel like we're competing on who's having the happiest life or something, to we just have an honest, genuine conversation of this is who I am, this is one of the stories that it's operating in me, and I don't want to have shame or disconnection or feel like I can't share this. I want to be able to share it and be free. Once it's out there, it's not mine anymore. And whether you like it or don't like it, it's on my wall, so go somewhere else if you don't like it. And so the stories, all of us tell stories. And obviously in mindfulness, when we sit and practice, we're trying to get to a less fabricated sense of reality, more direct, sensory, clear experience of reality. But our minds operate through stories, and there's a lot of stories that operate while we're meditating. Stories like, I can't do this is too hard, or I think I'm getting enlightened, this is it. Stories like so-and-so knows how to meditate and I don't. These are all stories, though. All these stories that seem so true and real. And the part of the story that we focus on is the part of the story that we empower. And so one of the big learnings for me in practicing is noticing what are the stories that are happening, whether I'm on the cushion or in community with other people. What are these automatic stories that have navigated, driven, manipulated, enslaved my day-to-day life and practice? If I start feeling an intense body sensation, do I automatically have the story of this is bad, I should stop practicing? Or can I reinterpret this story to say, this might be the right exact breaking point where I hit my next opportunity, my next big breakthrough in practice. All I have to do is stay with this for another second right now. And again, okay, it's still here, another second right now. If I get distracted and I've just started thinking about Soryu returning tomorrow? Do I have the story of I'm such a bad meditator, I can't believe I'm teaching people how to meditate and I can't even practice for more than a few minutes? Or do I have the story of, wow, I really care about Soryu, but right now, I think what would make him really happy is if he knew that I was practicing rather than trying to do something for him during a meditation period. You know, every story has multiple parts, and the part of the story that we choose to put our attention on is the part of the story that gets empowered. All of us have a lot of stories. We can choose to think about the people that helped us in our life, or we can choose to think about the people that have wronged us in our life. Which isn't to say that we should have some sort of optimistic, naive, let's only think about the good things and ignore all the bad things or something. That wouldn't be honest or authentic. But the point is that these stories aren't who we are. They're just stories. And we can choose to see them as stories. And then we can share those stories and we can create new stories. We can make these stories from a subjective experience of this is just the truth of who I am to an objective awareness of this is what's coming up for me right now. I think the biggest story that we have I think the biggest story we have is that one of the biggest stories I think we have is that we're disconnected. Just the main story that I think the world's trying to impart on people today is that you have to just be careful and look out for yourself. Community is a hindrance. What we really want is independence and freedom and the option to jet set across the world and see a lot of beautiful experiences. But in reality, our minds are no separate from our bodies, and our self is no separate from our environment. And so, everything I'm sharing tonight is a story. So we don't take these stories necessarily as absolutely true, but we can see which stories are helping us, which stories are not helping us. And we use mindfulness to be willing to enter these new territory where we hold the stories we normally take as true as a maybe. Maybe these are true. These stories were true definitely when I was a child. At least they felt very true as a child. They still feel true right now. But maybe I can try taking a different action, a different way of relating, a different way of meditating, and test this story to see if there's a different reality that happens if I do a different action. And each time we do that, it's really courageous, it's really vulnerable, and it demonstrates to everyone else that we can do this, that we're free, that we're not enslaved by the stories that society gave us, or childhood trauma gave us, or our culture feeds us. We can choose our own stories. And as these days the world is entering a period of great transition and a great in many ways great risk, perhaps more than ever, the stories we've chosen up until now are causing a lot of suffering. And so we need more newer stories, better stories, stories that connect, stories that empower, stories that allow us to be free of our own stories, stories that self-liberate, stories whose purpose is to help you to see that it's a story. Ultimately, as the Buddha died, he said, Don't just believe what I'm saying, but really use these techniques and practices and test it for yourself. Test it for yourself and find out for real if this works or not. If it does, it'll help relieve suffering. And if it doesn't, well, at least now you know and you can go do something else. But really test it. So, let's go ahead and test it. So generally throughout this evening, if you're new here, we're going to do 2 periods of meditation. If at any time you feel like standing up or stretching, feel free to do so. Just try to do it as silently as you can to minimize distractions for others. If you have a certain technique, a certain practice that you're familiar with and you want to continue, feel free to do that during this next 2 sits. Otherwise, I'll offer some minimal guidance and instruction that you can follow along. Generally speaking, I like to start all my sits checking with my physical posture. Changing and breaking the story from I'm not worthy, I'm kind of lazy or something, to a more noble, dignified posture. Chest open, feet firmly on the ground or legs on the ground if you're sitting on the floor. And check your mental story, check your mental attitude. Choose an intention, choose a story that empowers you. All these stories are stories. So you can choose a story that's relaxing, that's empowering, that's motivating, inspiring. I've had a hard week, so I'm going to choose to practice tonight in a way that brings me relaxation or happiness or at least some time with just myself. Don't have to worry about the world or other people. So just worry about my own experience. Be with my own experience. For this practice that I'm doing, I dedicate to all living beings, that the more clear and relaxed and focused that I am, no matter what this next hour is, will somehow help me be more focused and relaxed and therefore be of service to those I love and the world that I depend on. Any intention you choose is completely fine. Just give yourself the option, if you wish, to choose a positive story. So for this 30 minutes, we'll do what Shinzen would call a feel-good technique. You can bring the mind, bring to your body a positive feeling. If you wish, you can use a memory, you can use an image of someone you love, you can use a sound, or if you can, just directly call up a feeling of a positive feeling in your body. And if you can call up, if a positive feeling shows up in your body, focus on it with your attention for as long as it's present. Just paying attention to that positive feeling in your body. And if it goes away, again, just think of music you like, people you love, memories that bring gratitude or joy, and see if you can recall up a feeling of positivity in your body. And once it's there, just focus on it in your body. If this is challenging and you're not feeling positive feelings during the sit, that's fine. Just the intention of wanting to do this, trying to do this, you're doing really good work. Use the story that by doing this practice, I'm training my mind, I'm training my body, I'm training my heart. And I'm not going to judge myself for whatever happens in these 30 minutes. If at any time you have a negative thought, a negative distraction telling you that you can't do this or you should stop, see if there's a different story you can tell using the same exact sensory experience, the same exact data, but come up with a different interpretation. Otherwise, use your mind to call up support and grow a positive feeling in the body, and then pay attention, put your awareness on that positive feeling in the body, and just stay there. Nice job, everyone. So we'll take a 5-minute silent break if you want to use the bathroom or stretch, or walk, and come back here in 5 minutes and do our next session. Okay. Nice job, everyone. So for this next part, we're going to continue working with this theme of stories. Of course, again, if you have a certain practice you want to do or you like the previous guided practice, feel free to continue with that. This is just an invitation to explore stories. Ultimately, on this path of spirituality, we're seeking to be free of all fixed views, letting go. And by playfully being creative and able to hold our stories, hold our ideas lightly, knowing that they're stories that we're holding just for now. We don't need to make them into permanent, fixed things that we identify with. So for this next period, it's going to be somewhat open. Try and guide yourself. Using your own voice, using your own visuals in your mind. Encourage, support, coach yourself to do a technique. You can do the technique we just did. Other easy ones could be hear out. Listen to the sounds in the room, just paying attention to the sounds in the room. You can count your breaths. You can do chants or mantras in your head. Any technique. If anytime you get discouraged or lost, you can use your voice to guide yourself back. Whatever's happening in the room, one story you can have is, this dog is lovely, teaching us how to be natural and spontaneous, following the script of its own story. Combat the default story that might be arising of, it's distracting me. Choose whatever's happening to fold it back into your story as a positive. Whatever's happening. If a negative feeling comes up, use your own creativity to create a positive story of how this is helping you create more compassion, learn how to be in difficult situations, deal with uncertainty. Using a sweet or neutral voice, maybe remembering someone that you love or someone that you trust guiding you in this practice. Just choose a technique. Again, you could follow your breath, hear out, any technique. And just continuously, as much as needed, as much as you want, as much as you can, talk to yourself to create a positive story of doing this technique. Anytime you get really distracted and you really get down on yourself, create a positive story of yourself. Remember all the successes, all the trials, all the challenges, all the good that you've done, all the good that's been done for you. There's a lot of options to create a positive story. But one way to help in this technique is you can just say encouraging things like, keep going, you got this, you're doing a good job, you can do it. Just one more time. Kind of like you're working out at the gym. Got a good gym trainer who's encouraging you, supporting you. Another possible option is whatever's happening, just say yes, just say thank you, just say perfect. This is exactly what I needed right now. Thank you, air conditioner. Thank you, stomach pain. Thank you, uncertainty. So forward, whatever's happening, thank it, and keep going. Okay, nice job, everyone. This is the final portion where group discussion. If anyone wants to ask a question, share a report, anything about your practice for the week or in general, any insights or wisdom you want to share, please feel free.
There were 2 times this week, and one of them was in the first meditation tonight, where I felt like I'm doing whatever I'm doing badly, or what I'm meditating badly. And you actually helped me through the first one. I think that helped a little bit today, where it's both times in that moment of, oh, I'm seeing that I'm doing this really badly, or I'm noticing that I'm having trouble staying awake, or I can't remember what the other one was, or I'm getting distracted. I'm noticing that when I really let myself look at that, and also admit that I really want to do better and I don't know how, but I'm gonna try, so, like, actually really did help both times. And I don't think I let myself fall into not knowing, or let myself be in a place of not knowing very often, so I'm just sort of celebrating this new new attempt, new way of being with where I'm at, more honestly and more fully, and celebrating the ways that it seems, at least this week in 2 instances, seems to have allowed me to go beyond the point at which I'm at. So I just felt like sharing that, and I'm excited about continuing to explore that.
That's really nice. Reminds me of we're having that talk yesterday at the monastery, and someone said something about like that space of not knowing, where there's confusion and uncertainty and just grappling, and I don't know what to do. This is where I think it was Thorson said this, but it's where where we get traction for the insight of how to actually do it. And I have a very similar story programmed into me from childhood of, I don't know if it's the same story, but my story is I should always already know the answer. If I'm not doing it right, or I don't know the answer, then I made a mistake. But of course, mindfulness is something we do with our bodies, along with our minds. And it makes sense that just like I wouldn't expect a child to know how to ride a bike or swim, immediately, it makes sense that most of us don't know how to be perfectly concentrated and equanimous and clear when we come down to meditate, because it's a visceral skill. I think before I joined the monastery, I worked also as a programmer. It's interesting, because when I was growing up, programming wasn't a very fashionable career like it is these days. I know like lawyers and doctors who are becoming trading their profession to become programmers now. It's really strange to me. But programming is interesting because it's very mental based. You just learn these ideas, and then you can immediately create something and test it, and get immediate feedback of whether or not it's correct or not. And then you can look up the answer or try something else and then test it again. And it's this wonderfully mental game that in past years, when we're doing like woodworking or raising crops, you couldn't. It was not a mental game. There's visceral, physical, embodied skills that take time and practice to really hone. Not to say that you don't need to practice in programming. There's definitely a lot of practicing, a lot of other stuff going on, but the amount of embodied, sort of visceral muscle memories, not so much. And I think that's true, at least growing up with academia and education, that we get instilled this idea of like, if I just mentally know the right answers, then I'm good, I'm correct. But then when we try to practice something like mindfulness, or being compassionate, or taking leadership, teaching someone, raising someone, listening to someone, suddenly we learn, oh, these are skills that are not just mental. Like I just need to know the top 3 things for how to give a Dharma talk. Speak clearly, know what you're talking about, and listen. Those are all really hard to actually do. Even if I know them. I just made that list up, but even if I know things, it's a skill of actually embodying them. So it's really exciting to actually hear you report that the courage, the vulnerability, the willingness, the acceptance, the allowance to enter that space of not knowing, I don't know. And there's this sort of leap of faith of I'm willing to just struggle and be in this not knowing space and trust that somehow I'm going to figure it out. It's going to figure itself out. Did I say anything that would contradict?
The only thing I'd add to it is not just that it'll figure itself out, but that my intention to be better, or my desire to get past this block matters and is fuel that can actually help me get through this whatever block it is.
Totally. It's good to hear. Well,
in the second practice, early on an image arose earlier today when I was processing with someone who I felt really cared for by, and then the whole meditation just became thinking of all the people who love and care for me, and just really embodying specific memories of feeling cared for by them. And I've never gone there in my practice before, because I feel like in my practice I'm always trying to make myself do something, and this time I was just allowing the images and the memories of the people to arise without trying to look for them or pull them up or interact with them in a certain way, but just letting myself really feel them. And it was really nice.
it's nice to hear that. I think that's a great technique.
I'm just thinking of this whole sort of narrative kind of thing, and my experience of it during the last week or so, as I've been trying to present myself, in this case, to like possible employers and stuff, and feeling frustrated about what I feel like I could or couldn't communicate, and just having the awareness that I wasn't really trying to communicate certain things when I really looked at it and meditated on it, that I wasn't I don't know if I can communicate all the things about myself that I want to be able to communicate about myself to people. But regardless, if I don't even attempt to write something or attempt to try to sort of formulate it in a certain way and see if someone is receptive to it, it's a fiction in my mind too, and a story that I'm sort of making up around it that I can't. And so I just found it really interesting to sort of try to sort of go through meditatively with those different sort of levels of it and just try to become aware of, well, what could I actually do in a situation where I feel paralyzed? So it came up again when I was meditating here through some of it, just sort of continuing through that sort of sense of it, and this sort of thing you were saying about sort of creating a positive narrative when something came up that didn't, and my resistance to it, like my resistance to actually telling a really positive story about myself if I don't think it's necessarily something that fits someone else's worldview. Even if it's just to myself, never mind to someone else.
Could you elaborate on the last part? There's a resistance of making a positive narrative if you think it wouldn't fit someone else's worldview?
I spend so much time trying to navigate the world with everyone else, and thinking about how I can, fit into different situations or communicate myself or present myself or do things that translate my experience into something that's socially navigable or viable. And so after a certain point, I think I get stuck in those patterns or stuck in the ways that I've sort of learned to do it. And I have to sort of reset all of the things that I tell myself, well, no, I can do this, but I can't do this. I can do this, but I can't do this. I can go this direction now and not this direction, right now, or that kind of thing. And at a certain point that may have been functional, and some of it still may be functional. So if I say, I really can't say this and have someone receive it well, that may be true, but it may not always be true, or it may not be something that I have to be telling myself the rest of the time. That's kind of, I'm being abstract, I'm not giving a specific example, but
sure.
if that sort of makes sense. So like, for example, I have experiences with stuff related to mindfulness, for example, and that's not something I can necessarily communicate with everyone in every context, because it's not a shared set of experience, or some people really won't believe in it, or that kind of thing.
Right. What comes to mind hearing that is sort of a spectrum on this nurture positive story making. On one hand, if I have leg pain, I don't know if I would believe myself if I just said, this leg pain is actually pleasant. There's a way in which that violates some deeper sense of honesty or authenticity or realism. I don't want to enter just delusional states where I'm making stories that aren't pragmatic or effective. But what I could do is, last time I was on retreat, I had a very similar amount of leg pain that happened around the same amount of time. And I worked through it that time, so I think I could probably work through it this time. Or this leg pain represents one day I'm going to get sick, or someone I know and care about is going to get sick, and they're going to have an inescapable physical pain that they'll have to go through. They won't have the choice if they can just stand up and not feel pain. So maybe this will teach me compassion and humility of the willingness to be with this leg pain. Instead of the normal story that might come up of, poor me, if I was really mindful, this pain would never come up, and it's because I'm not concentrated that this leg pain is bothering me and I get so distracted by it. In that sense, it's more changing the interpretation around something that's there. So in that sense, what I'm hearing from you is sort of like, in working with other people, especially if you're trying to win their approval or prove to them they should hire you or something, it might not be pragmatic or effective just to make up stories that make yourself feel good, but that other people would never believe necessarily. But I can go on a date, or I can go apply for a job, or I can go sit. And even if it goes poorly and I don't get the job, I don't get the date, I can't concentrate at all during a sit, I can still choose to interpret that experience in a different way and say, well, this will help me for the next time. Kind of exactly what Rosie said. This didn't work, and I don't know if it's me or them or what I'm doing or what's wrong, but at least this is good fodder and data for next time I try. And I survived this time, so I can probably do it again next time. And there's a lot of courage, a lot of honesty that I even tried. If you asked me a month ago, I probably wouldn't have even tried because it would have seemed too daunting, but I actually tried. It didn't work out, but I tried. That's great. So I would hesitate around telling stories that are hypocritical, completely not pragmatic, doesn't line up with reality at all. I think for a lot of us, maybe not all of us if we're lucky, but for a lot of us, we tend to tell overly pessimistic, cynical stories, partly based on biology and evolution and partly based on social conditioning. So this is one way to try telling a different story that empowers us to try again rather than stories that make us feel like we've failed or something. Does that line up at all?
I think it's what you're saying does line up with my experience, but I guess what I'm saying is I'm hesitating to tell true stories, even to myself, that are positive, because I have this experience of needing to couch things in ways that are almost maybe a little bit self-denying, kind of, but not necessarily honestly. So it's like, to try to say something about myself that may be true, but I can't prove to someone that's positive or something. And then as I habituate to not doing that, I start having trouble even with the idea of attempting it, even if I could. And that, but I think what you're saying is true. I mean, obviously, I wouldn't be like, I'm an astronaut, and that would be beyond integrity externally.
Yeah. I think one thing you're saying that I think is really important is that everything that we do matters. How every action, every behavior, every thought matters, and how I live my life, how I function in work, how I function at home, how I practice, they all impact each other. And my body and my mind doesn't know the difference between being on the cushion and talking to someone, being at work or being at home. They all feel the same thing. And so That's why I gave a talk a few weeks ago about the importance of, well, I said virtue back then, but maybe I should have said integrity or something, which is everything matters and everything's related. So how I function in any domain has an impact on how I function in any other domain. And so that's why at the monastery, at least, we care so much about integrity and honesty and keeping your commitments. So it seems like, why should it matter if I said I'm going to be on time and I'm 1 minute late? Because that will have an impact in times when it really does matter. And so if you can hold your integrity in those moments where it doesn't matter, you're more likely to hold your integrity when it really does matter, and the situation is a lot more turbulent, stressful, challenging. So I think that's a good point you're bringing up in terms of actions have consequences and behavior builds habits. Danielle?
In the second section, you offered the suggestion to say, like, thank you, whatever's coming up, thank you, yes, this is perfect for me right now. And that was perfect for me right then. Actually, I have a lot of discomfort in my back, and I'm always resisting it, or like breathing into it, trying to make it go away, you know. And so I had never done this before, like what you suggested, and I like immediately relaxed. And then I started thinking how excited I am to have that, like, as a way to get rid of it next time. So I don't know if it'll work then, but it was really neat. It was really neat, and it helped me get to a place of just like in my body feeling restful. So that was lovely.
That's good to hear. It brings to mind, like, when I'm on like really intense long retreats, sometimes I get to this place that Rosie mentioned, like, I don't know what the heck I'm doing, nothing's working, everything's tense. And the option is either keep doing this and it doesn't seem like it's working, or just kind of like give up, not in the sense of like, I'm gonna stop trying, but give up like any sense of control, or like, I'm doing this thing to get rid of this pain kind of thing. It's just like, okay, if this leg pain is here for the rest of my life, fine. I give up. Bring in the leg pain, that's fine. I'm not gonna subtly resist it or hold it back. And it's weird because in a sense, like, most of the time, that's like the last thing that I think is the thing I should be doing. But in fact, that acceptance of willingness to feel whatever the situation is lets me actually digest the experience, and then 9 times out of 10, like you said, it goes away. But the fear of feeling it creates resistance and just compounds itself to this bigger and bigger thing. So one road is just, tense and trying, and then I have to give up. And there's other way that's really nice of just saying, yes, okay, thank you. Okay, I need a bit of pain right now. Okay, that's what I should feel. Okay, good. But for us stubborn people, you can go this other way of, I'm just going to resist and resist until I can't take it anymore and I have to let go. We have time for maybe 1 or 2 more if there's one out there. Jesse?
In terms of this discussion that's already been raised, and maybe about my experience too, is it seems that it's appropriate to bring in what I'm learning from Abraham. That's to pay attention to whatever is raising the vibration, to pay attention to whatever is making you feel good. So it's it's been helping me. And what I was just doing was to, in this project that is coming up against a deadline this week, I could get really stressed out, and I am, and this was very helpful to imagine the end result and to notice actually things that were undone, missing, etc., and to see it as no problem, to find satisfaction in solving the problem, to find satisfaction in noticing what's missing, to find satisfaction in being grateful that we're doing this, that it's possible to, instead of doing a mindless practice, we are doing a what do you call it? Contemplative practice, and I thought, this isn't going to work. This is wrong. I should be just, raising my vibration by thinking nothing. And yet it worked to concentrate. And within that story of what I'm doing and the end result of what I'm doing, I found myself staying with what part of this is satisfying, not to look at it like, oh my God, I have this deadline, or there are these problems to solve, or oh, there's something missing. Thank you. I needed to know that, or just continuing going to the satisfaction or no problem. I love it when people say no problem. and in fact, that might be a good way to do what you were talking about. It's just no problem. Just moving towards what works and what feels good, and just keep paying attention to how does this feel. Because in that feeling good, it raises the vibration, and that's what you were saying. It's a good story.
Yeah. It's funny because that was actually one of the techniques I was considering doing, which was contemplate when you felt good in your life, and what's the common story in those moments. Yeah, it's funny because one of my stories is that I'm never doing a good enough job. I should always be doing a better job at whatever I'm doing. If there's anything that's off, like you said, then I've failed. And so sometimes when I'm meditating and I have to realize, oh, there's a tension, and I've been telling that story subtly to myself throughout the day, I might spend like several minutes just telling myself, I am a good person. And I'll go through a long list of things. I actually have an Evernote list of things, nice things people have said to me. So if you say nice things to me, it's a good chance I'm going to record it in a list and read it later. Incentive to share it with me. And I'll just think of nice things, how I'm a good person, to counteract the story that's subtly on autoplay that I'm a bad person, that I'm not good enough, or I haven't been conscious enough or attentive enough, or whatever it is. And it turns out feeling good, it's easier to practice. It just turns out, wow, it's easier to focus when I feel good. Now, there's another whole level different of intensity where the reality comes really home of like, I need to practice. It's like a life or death thing. That's a whole nother level. But let's put that aside. Most of the time, it's good just to feel good. And really, to even get to that desperate, really intense place means, I think the doorway is through feeling good. Because the willingness to enter that really desperate life or death place, often you either pushed into it by necessity, or out of confidence that you can actually go there. And so I really love that you shared that it's easier to practice and concentrate when I'm at a higher vibrational frequency. Which doesn't mean you have to be ecstatic or high or something, but just having just a general positive attitude and a willingness to smile a little bit while I'm practicing changes a lot. So I should do it more often. So thank you all for coming out tonight. Thank you for the punchline to my story that I think I forgot was something like, then I came to the monastery and found the most loving, perfect community. I like a good story, you relieve the tension at the end. So end of the practice will do that. Thank you all for coming out. It's been an honor and joy to be up here for the past 4 months. I'm sure I'll still be here sometimes, but you also get a taste of Sorya's teachings, and I come directly from his lineage, his teachings. So there you go. That was the weirdest sentence I've ever said. So I think there's some closing announcements, and then move on out.
So we in the night sharing some events in the area where we can get involved.